Voice America, live. This is Point of View. And now, Kerby Anderson.
Thank you for joining us, the Thursday edition of Point of View. And over the next 2 hours, we're going to be spending some time talking with Dr. Gary Frazier about some of the prophetic significance of what is happening in Iran and in the Middle East, and then also with our good friend Walker Wildmon, Vice President of Operations and Public Policy Analysis at American Family Association. We'll get into a variety of different topics, but one of those, which I think is good to address before we talk with Gary Frazier, is, how is the war really going? I mean, sometimes we wonder, who can we trust? And so I've given you actually two different articles. These are two opinion pieces, one from the New York Times, one from National Review. So you can kind of get a sense of that. And the one from the New York Times by Bret Stephens kind of gets into maybe how to analyze some of this. Oil, the military equipment, uranium, even the cooperation with the Arabs. And we'll get to one by Noah Rothman. But he reminds us that if you go back to March of 2012, most people probably at that time, if they were to look on their particular websites, would say, well, that was when Hunger Games was in the box office. Barack Obama was on his way to a re-election. But at the time, crude oil, $123 a barrel, which today would be $175 a barrel in today's dollars. It most recently was hovering around $95 to $100. So certainly in terms of oil prices, we may be complaining about the price of gas going up, but nothing like we had back in 2012. And then, of course, he gets into the fact that if you were to watch a lot of the comments being made right now, and one in particular quotes from an individual, a senator, I think is running for president, said, we've never seen this level of incompetence in war making in this country's history. And he says, really? Well, let's just take a tour here for a minute. How about the loss of equipment? In Operation Desert Storm, we lost 75 aircraft, 42 of them in combat. So far, we've actually lost 4, but 3 to friendly fire and 1 in an accident. No single manned plane has been lost over Iran. When you talk about back at Desert Storm, it played 6 weeks. That was called a lightning fast war. Here, people already saying, when is this going to end? And then reminds us of whether you talk about the invasion of Panama, the Persian Gulf crisis, or a variety of others. We certainly have done very well. Another one to look at is to remember the erroneous information used at the time that Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction. Never did find those, did we? But we do know there's 970 pounds of highly enriched uranium because they admitted it themselves. And that, I think, illustrates how close they were to some kind of military action that would allow for a very different kind of Middle East than the one we see right now. And then one other point he talks about, even during the Bush administrations, both Bush 1 and 2, you had very little support from the Arab nations. The other day, Saudi Arabia's crown prince was pushing President Trump to continue the war so that the Middle East would be safer. So as he was doing a very quick comparison, I do encourage you to get this article from the New York Times, 4 pages of just a reminder of what it was like in the past. But just to keep going, let me go to our second article by Noah Rothman, who once again reminds us that we're being told that this is a hapless war. We're not winning. It's a disaster and all the rest. And of course, he gives you some very important quotes about that, but reminds us once again that we were able to neutralize 40 different senior Iranian leadership figures on almost the first day. After 2 weeks of the war, we were able to completely devastate the Iranian Air Force. Goes on to talk about the issue of ballistic missiles and how we've been able to degrade that, which leads to my third article, which I'll just mention in passing, the fact that Iran could still launch a missile all the way to Diego Garcia. You might say, well, I don't even know where that is. Well, just know that if you look at that circle and put that circle around Iran, you could realize they could fire these missiles into Europe. And then finally just points out the fact that there were war games that were actually done for many years about what it would be like if we were engaged in a war in Iran. None of them had an outcome as favorable as this. So I've given you 3 very different articles, one from the New York Times, one from National Review, one from the Wall Street Journal. And so if you're starting to say, who do I trust? How about some people that put some facts on the table rather than engage in hyperbole or maybe even attacking Donald Trump? And so that's just one of the many things we provide here at Point of View. And again, this is our fourth day of our Truth Team. Collin Lambert, sometimes people say, I don't know who to believe. That's why I post multiple articles for people to read it themselves.
I love that. And that's one of the wonderful things about Point of View, the material, the resources available to you at Point of View each and every day on the website, pointofview.net. A wide variety of voices speaking into the topics of the day. And, of course, Kerby and his guests with great reflection on those topics as well. And that's one of the reasons we want you to get involved. This is Truth Team Week. We take a couple of weeks during the year and we say, can you help us stay on the air across the country? You are helping fund what we do here. We don't have any government grants. There's no big endowment that's helping keep Point of View on the air. Your gifts make it possible. We are in the final 2 days of Truth Team Week, and I want to encourage you. You might hear some urgency in my voice because 2 days remain, and we need to hear from you. We're looking for 75 calls or clicks today. Calling 800-347-5151, 800-347-5151, or pointofview.net with gifts of any amount. 75 calls or clicks. We'd like to see that. Maybe to encourage you in that process, we've got some matching challenges going on today, and we're going to kick it off with our good friend Barbara Franklin from Georgia. She has made $1,000 available in a dollar-for-dollar match. So right now, you can double your gift. You put in $50, she'll put in $50. That's the way it's going to work. So your gift right now doubled at 800-347-5151. Same thing when you click in online at pointofview.net. Dollar-for-dollar match up to $1,000. It starts right now, 800-347-5151.
We will come back to this issue of what is happening in the Middle East, and a lot of people want to know, how does this all come together, especially with the issue of Russia and Iran and some of those kinds of issues. As a matter of fact, one of the things that's also in this very interesting article is that it reminds us that up until now, there was the assumption that Iran would have help from Russia and China. That so-called trilateral strategic pact turned out not to work out very well. It turns out that as soon as the United States attacked Iran, China and Russia said, we'll just sit this out. And Beijing and Moscow said, we won't get involved at all. Instead, what you have is one individual that he mentions at the end who was calling in from Iran. And he said, more than 90% of the people in Iran are grateful to Donald Trump and to the USA for what they're doing. The only time people are worried is when the number of missiles decrease, because that means then there might be some Iranians in the street. But we have a dollar-for-dollar match on the table. And so as we go to a break, this is a perfect time to make that phone call, 800-347-5151. Calls or clicks. You can also click on pointofview.net. You don't have to miss any of that as well. And we do encourage your financial support. Come back, we're going to be talking with our good friend, Dr. Gary Frazier. We'd love to hear from you. 800-347-5151. We'll be right back.
This is Viewpoints with Kerby Anderson.
How are Gen Z employees doing in the workplace? Two articles point to significant problems. Susie Welch is a professor of NYU's Stern School of Business. In her article in the Wall Street Journal, she explains her values inventory that can help anyone, especially young adults, discover their purpose through the intersection of their values, aptitude, and economically viable interest. Her analysis produced a number that startled her coworkers and her. A mere 2% of Gen Z members hold the values that companies want most in new hires, namely achievement, learning, and an unbridled desire to work. She and her researchers surveyed 2,100 experienced hiring managers to identify the most important values they desired in their new employees. When they compared those values to the 45,000 Gen Z respondents, they found only 2% matched. These observations are being validated in real world in real time. Oriana Rose Royal, writing in Fortune, documents that bosses are firing Gen Z grads just months after hiring them. One report found that 6 in 10 employers have already sacked some Gen Z workers they hired out of college. The employers said that these young people lacked motivation or initiative. Other bosses pointed to Gen Z being unprofessional, unorganized, and having poor communication skills as their top reasons for firing these recent college graduates. There are some solutions. Companies can begin targeting their hiring efforts to find that 2%. Colleges can start alerting students to this issue, and students can start changing their attitudes so they can be a positive force in a company. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
Go deeper on topics like you just heard by visiting pointofview.net. That's pointofview.net. Restoring America's godly heritage. Point of View.
News sources like Point of View, with people like you whose character is unquestioned. Everybody knows what your values are. People, including young Americans, desperately need news sources like what you provide. And anybody listening today, I've said this before when you've had me on, if you were planning on giving to American values and you can only give one gift, give it to Point of View, because we're on the same team. And without people like Kerby, my work in Washington would go nowhere. Once again, to your faithful listeners, please step up now while there's still time, and support Point of View and Kerby. The job they do is second to none.
Point of View, restoring America's godly heritage.
Comments from our good friend Gary Bauer, who was with us earlier in the week. And we're going to be talking with our good friend Dr. Gary Frazier in just a minute. But in studio with me, Collin Lambert, fourth day of Truth team, and we have a match on the table.
We do. We've got a $1,000 dollar-for-dollar match thanks to Barbara Franklin, our friend in Georgia, who's made that possible. And I want to encourage you to get involved today, tomorrow. That's it. We've got less than 2 hours now today, 2 hours tomorrow. We really need to hear from you. This is the dollars and cents that help keep Point of View on the air. This is not extra. This is not extracurricular giving. This is what keeps Point of View on in your radio market. $150,000, our goal for the week. We are not anywhere near that at this point. So we're going to need gifts of every size. I want to point you back to God's Word quickly, though. 2 Corinthians 8, 1 through 5. Take a moment, read that. It talks about giving being an act of thanksgiving. It talks about giving bringing glory to our Father. And it talks about giving actually creating gratitude, which I love as well. That's where you kind of get this idea of the joy of being a generous, joyful giver. So I want to encourage you, whatever size gift you can give, whether it's $10, $30 a month, $50 a month, $100 a month. We're going to need some larger gifts, $5,000, $10,000 if we're going to make our goal. Do that right now, and we have a $1,000 dollar-for-dollar match on the board at 800-347-5151 or pointofview.net.
Joy, gratitude, and cheerful giving.
There
Certainly
you go.
Very important issues there. Definitely wanted to spend some time talking with Dr. Gary Frazier, well-known speaker, an individual who's president of Discovery Missions, probably been to Israel more than anybody I know. An individual who has authored a number of books. We feature one today, The Event, The Dream of World Peace Realized. Also has been a contributor to the Tim LaHaye Prophecy Study Bible, the popular encyclopedia of Bible prophecy. And so, Gary Frazier, welcome back to Point of View.
Hey, Kerby, it's always a joy to be with you, my brother.
What about this? I just before you came on the air pointed out that there had been this trilateral strategic pact between Moscow and Beijing and Tehran. And China and Russia right now are maybe backing off a little bit because of the attack on Iran. But it kind of brings us back to a coalition of nations that someday will indeed come against Israel. And that coalition involves nations that are associated associated with Persia, now known as Iran, Russia, and many of these other countries in the Middle East. Can you kind of speak to that?
Well, certainly, Kirby. You know, one of the things that I think is really important for our listeners to be reminded of is that there are things that we know for a fact that are biblical, and that then there are things that we think we know. And one of the things that we have no doubt about, that we know with absolute certainty, is what you just referenced, because 2,600 years ago, the prophet Ezekiel penned these words under the inspiration of the Holy Spirit, that there would be a Russian-led Islamic coalition in the last days. And every time I say that, I have to explain to people, because, you know, what we, to us, what is kind of commonplace, who study the scriptures all the time, I'm reminded that a lot of people are just totally unaware of the prophetic teachings of the Word of God, which make up 25% of the Bible at the time that they were written. And so many of those, you know, Dr. John Walvoord, president years ago of DTS, Dallas Theological Seminary, said there are 1,000 prophecies in Scripture that he had counted. 500 had been literally, fulfilled. So there's no reason to think that the remaining ones would not be. So when we hold the Bible in our hand and we look at what God said through the prophet Ezekiel, we can then begin to understand that he said that Gog of Magog. Now, what in the world does that mean? Because people read that and they think, I don't know, I don't get that. What is it? Well, Gog is the Hebrew word Rosh, which means head of, and Magog is a nation, an ancient nation. And of course, Herodotus, the father of ancient history, wrote in the 5th century BC that the Magogians were the people who lived around the Black Sea and the Caucasus Mountains and so forth, and basically he identified what today is Russia. So with absolute certainty, we can say, based on the authority of the Word of God, that there is going to come a Russian-led Islamic invasion of the nation of Israel. Now, in verse 5, you had mentioned a moment ago in your intro, in 1935, Persia became the Islamic Republic of Iran. And then he goes on to mention Kush, which is the southern part of Africa, Put, the northern part taking in Tunisia, Morocco, Algeria, and so forth. And then he mentions Betogama, which we can identify as portions of Turkey and so forth. And all of these countries that are named there, and he goes on to name several others, but the one common denominator that they all have is that they're all Islamic nations today, with the exception of Russia. But then 46% of the Russian military is made up of soldiers from the Stan countries when the Soviet Union fell apart. And those nations are all, you know, Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, and so forth. All of these countries are Islam in religion as well. So what we know is there's going to be this attack that will come. Now, this is what we know. We know where it's going to take place because it said it's going to take place on the mountains of Israel. And we know who it's going to be coming against because it said they're coming against the people who have been regathered back into their land. And it talks about the fact that they're dwelling in safety. Now, this is where one of the kickers really comes in because we have a real misunderstanding. Some of my colleagues in the prophetic teaching world, they actually believe that we're going to have a time of peace in the Middle East, and their position is really an argument from silence because they claim that because the near enemies of Israel, i.e. Syria, Lebanon, Jordan, Egypt, are not named in those nations in Ezekiel 38. But here's the problem. They're thinking more in terms of the word shalom, which is the word commonly that we all know of peace. But this is a phrase that is totally different. It is the Hebrew phrase Yisrael, Yishab Batak. And in verses 8 and 14 of chapter 38, when it talks about peace, it doesn't mean that there's an absence of threat. What it means is it's a relative peace. And you have to understand that for 1878 years, after 70 A.D., when the Jews were scattered into all the nations of the world, they were being hunted down and persecuted and killed. and now, in 1948, when God fulfilled his promise of Isaiah 66, verse 8, to gather them back, and in a single day the nation would be born. Well, since then, with the Israeli Defense Forces, while they have fought conflict after conflict after conflict, the bottom line is the Jewish people lay down at night even now, and sleep in peace, that is relative peace,
sure,
because they know the Israeli government is the military is the second greatest power on the face of the earth and they're protecting them.
Let me jump in real quickly because I want to see how we're doing on the match that we have here.
We've got a $1,000 dollar-for-dollar match on the board right now. We've got two gifts that just came in. Beverly in Georgia, $75. Krista in Illinois, $50. That's $125, which leaves us $875 to go in this dollar-for-dollar match. We've got about 34 minutes remaining in the hour. Let's see if we can knock this out quickly with your gifts. 800-347-5151 or pointofview.net.
We'll come back to Gary in just a few minutes because, again, I know you want to hear the rest of that, but also just know that when we have him on or many other guests, your inclination to make a phone call is rather muted. And so we're going to, as we go to a break, encourage you to make that phone call right now. If you're saying, okay, I've been waiting till the almost last day. It is the second to last day of our Truth Team Week, and we certainly have a very significant goal that we would like to achieve. We certainly would encourage your financial involvement with us. And if you've been waiting to the last day or so, that's come. And so again, that number is 800-347-5151. Of course, you can go to the website, pointofview.net. As you go there, there's a couple of things. First of all, you can find out more about Gary Frazier. We have a link there to GaryFrazier.com, and you can see some of his material there, maybe even schedule him to speak or maybe interact with him on some of the issues. We have, of course, information about his book, The Event, The Dream of World Peace. But that's also a place where you can click that button that says Give Now, and we hope that you will consider doing so. We're really looking for a number of you today that maybe could join with us on the Truth Team level. That's $1 a day, $30 a month or more. And as a result, you receive the Outlook magazine, the booklets, even this new golf umbrella that collapsed down to 22 inches. And I think you will appreciate that as well. So as we go to a break, I'd love to hear from you. 800-347-5151, pointofview.net. We'll continue with Gary Frazier right after this.
America's founding fathers knew that freedom requires morality. It was John Adams who said, "Our Constitution was made only for a moral and religious people. It is wholly inadequate to the government of any other." If we want to preserve the freedom in America, we must equip Americans with a biblical worldview once more. For over 50 years, Point of View has done just that by applying a biblical perspective to every issue of the day, thanks to our ministry partners, people like you. And that is why I'm asking you to join the Truth Team. And the time to join is right now, because Point of View needs to raise $150,000 this week. Help America reclaim its moral compass. Join the Truth Team today by visiting pointofview.net or call 1-800-347-5151. That's pointofview.net and 1-800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this. You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is Kerby Anderson.
Back once again. Let's, if we can, get back to that conversation in just a minute. If you have a Bible, you might even turn to Ezekiel 38 and 39. But first of all, I thought Collin Lambert, maybe you can give us an update on how we're doing on the match.
Yeah, we have a $1,000 dollar-for-dollar match on the board from Barbara in Georgia, and I'm pleased to let you know that we've met that goal. We had a call in from Gary in Texas with a $1,000 gift, Melody in Georgia with $50, Lynn in New Mexico with $100. That put us right past that match. So we want to thank Barbara for putting it up, and we want to thank the others for getting on board and getting their dollars matched. That really helps us move forward. And I'm going to celebrate that, and we're going to keep moving, Kerby, because I've got another matching challenge on the board right now. Pat in Pennsylvania has made it possible for us to have a $1,200
Wow.
dollar
Okay.
for dollar match, and we're going to roll that one right now. So again, you can just keep calling. We've got another matching challenge on the board. 800-347-5151. 800-347-5151 or pointofview.net. We'll count it either way. Your gifts right now being doubled thanks to Pat in Pennsylvania.
Gary, let me come back to you before we get into, again, Ezekiel
Sure.
38 and 39. I know you are supporting Point of View, and what would you say to our listeners why they should support Point of View?
Well, Kerby, first of all, I couldn't agree more that we're in a critical time in the history of America in particular, because we have an anti-Christian media, anti-Jewish media, who simply attacks all the principles that we hold dear to us, biblical principles. And the fact of the matter is, the booklets that you write, the program that you do on a daily basis, really, I don't know of anybody else who does anything near, I've said often, many, many times, I've said over and over, Kerby Anderson's the smartest guy I know. And I'll tell you, every time I've ever been with you and you've interviewed me on any number of the books that I've written, you've read the book, you know what to ask, and you're one of those talented guys that really, you just have an ability to share the truth. And I appreciate you so much. And, we've been friends for many, many years. And I just hold you and Point of View in the program in the highest regard, because you're doing something that I don't know of anybody else that's on the same parallel as you guys are. So just grateful to be a part of it.
Well, thank you. Let's see if we can get back to that, because people have said, okay, we know who the participants are. We know sort of the time situation. And I think it'd be important, Gary, to mention that I don't know anybody that believes Ezekiel 38 and 39 as a prophecy has been fulfilled. So that is something in the future, but it could be very easily in the near future, don't you think?
Absolutely, because, twice in that passage, Ezekiel writes about, and he makes this, it says, in future days. And so the bottom line is, as we look back through history, never has there been anything like this that has happened. First of all, we have to remember that Islam was not even born into the world until the 5th century AD. So the bottom line here is that we know it's something that's coming. Now, one of the big questions is, and the thing that everybody wants to know is when. Well, here's what I'm going to say today as I share with people. And by the way, if anybody, I have a prophetic timeline that I show events that are prophesied in Scripture to take place. I have the Scriptures associated with it in the proper places. We're more than happy to send that to anybody who sends an email to me at GaryFrazier.com. We'll be glad to email that to them. But one of the things that's important, I think, to understand is that if you look carefully at Scripture, we have two future events that are looming on the near horizon. The first one is the trumpet blast of God that calls the believers home in the event that we know as the rapture of the church, or the coming of Christ for the saints. There's no question that we are not party to what is coming, and that is the Great Tribulation period that will be 2,520 days of literal hell on earth, when 50% of the world's population will perish. The church is not a part of that. We've not been appointed unto wrath, but to obtain salvation, as Paul writes to us in 1 Thessalonians 5. Having said that, we also know that there's another event that's going to take place, and that is this conflict in Ezekiel 38 and 39. Now, why am I saying that is on the heels of the departure of the church? And it makes perfect sense if we realize that the evangelical body of Christ, we are the supporters of Israel's right to exist in the land that God gave them. We stand with them. But when we're gone, no one will be standing with Israel. And it will be the perfect storm that is opportunity for the forces of Islam then to come against the nation of Israel to fulfill their long-held desire of wiping the nation of Israel off the face of the map. Now, why would I say it comes in that order? It is because we know that the Bible tells us in chapter 39 that the carnage will be so great, it'll be 7 months they'll be burying the dead. But it also goes on to say that for 7 years they will burn, that meaning they, being Israel, will burn or use the weapons of warfare as fuel. Well, some of my colleagues who put this in the middle of the tribulation period, it makes no sense at all, because why would we burn fuel 3.5 years into the millennial reign of Christ when Christ is reigning on the earth? So it has to be 7 years back. And so that occurs. But here's the thing. Those two events, if you think about it, these two events open the door for the man of sin, the Antichrist, to come on the scene and say, I have a plan for world peace, and the whole world follows after him. And that's why I wrote this book, the event, The Dream of World Peace Realized, because mankind has longed to have peace, and yet what does the Bible say? Men will cry, peace, peace, but there'll be no peace. And apart from Christ, there is absolutely no peace in any person's life. And so our goal is to say, we know what's coming. We're seeing the world stage set in an unprecedented manner. Please, we're begging you, look at what we're saying, listen to what we're saying, and realize that time is short, because when that trumpet blast sounds, those who are not in Christ are left behind. And that's the thing that we dread the most for them, because literally that 2000, they have no idea what is coming upon the face of the earth in that 2,520 days.
Well, let me again mention that we do have a link to your website, GaryFrazier.com, and there's an email place where if somebody would like to get that, because I'm sure a lot of people are saying, that was pretty fast. I'd like to look up all the verses and see it in order. Yep. You would certainly be making that available. But first of all, Collin, how are we doing on the match? I think we're getting at least a few people responding, aren't we?
Well, we got the first one taken care of. We got a brand new one on the board right now. Pat in Pennsylvania has provided $1,200 for a dollar-for-dollar match. We've got 19 minutes remaining in this hour. I'd love to knock it out before that 19 minutes is over. Any gift of any amount right now is doubled up to $1,200 at 800-347-5151. We're in the final day and a half now, about a day and a half of these 2 days of Truth Team Week. Time's running out. Urgency is key. 800-347-5151 or pointofview.net. First-time giver, one-time gift, monthly gift. You can also increase your gift. If you give monthly, you might consider upping your gift. Or maybe if you give monthly, you give a special one-time gift during this Truth Team Week. However you want to do it, we've got a dollar-for-dollar match on the board up to $1,200 right now at pointofview.net.
Gary, just before we go, let me just mention again that we featured your book. I also think if people are interested in making their way to Israel, I think by this time next year, all sorts of people are going to be wanting to go to Israel because of what has happened because of this war with Iran. Those are opportunities, and they can contact you and find out more about what you do through Discovery Missions, can't they?
They can, and I wanted you to know that I'm pleased to be a donor to Point of View as well, because you guys do an incredible job.
Well, again, it is great to have you on there. I know that our good friend Parker Ing is going to be there speaking at his Bible study, and then going to watch, hopefully, the launch of Artemis 2, which we talked about earlier in the week. But we need to take a break. And Gary, just great to talk with you. I'm looking forward to seeing you face to face.
Great talking to you.
He's in Florida right now. That's where a lot of that is taking place.
Yep.
But let's, if we can, remind people that now, because they are just glued to the radio and not wanting to call, now they can call, because there's a great opportunity.
Yeah, and great guests like Gary that we had on today. Just something you don't normally get in most talk shows around the country. And Kerby and team every day bringing you wonderful guests, incredible resources online. The book, the magazine that comes out each month, Outlook, the booklets that come out each month, all of those come your way, and it is an incredible ministry that obviously, if you're listening right now, you've been impacted by it. So I encourage you to impact us back. How about that? 800-347-5151, 800-347-5151, pointofview.net, a $1,200 dollar-for-dollar match on the board right now. Every gift right now is doubled. Don't miss out on this opportunity. Call right now.
As you might imagine, we have people literally waiting by the phones for them to ring. So it's probably the best use of their time and our resources for you to call. And I would encourage you to do so. That number is 800-347-5151. Sometimes they say we say it too fast. So again, 347-5151. Pretty easy to remember. 1-800-347-5151. Or of course, at any time, you can go to the website, pointofview.net, find out more about Gary Frazier, find some of the articles we mentioned, and click on that button that says Give Now. I'll be right back.
restoring America's godly heritage. Point of View.
Ministries like ours depend on ministries like this one. We can win cases, and we do, at all levels of courts, even including the Supreme Court, every day of the week and twice on Sunday. But if people don't understand those rights and don't put them into practice, then our wins will not mean that much years from now. And this is a way to have a conversation about them where people can learn more about them. And as I've said many times, you don't have to be a lawyer or a constitutional scholar, but you do need to know enough to know when your rights are being violated and when to come find us for help. And Point of View is invaluable in helping get that message out.
Point of View, restoring America's godly heritage.
Nathan Watts earlier in the week talking about that issue as Vice President of Alliance Defending Freedom, and even before that, having worked for First Liberty Institute. His big complaint is oftentimes these major radio stations and television stations will maybe talk about a case before it's resolved, but never come back and talk about it again. And we do, because they're looking for controversy and clicks, but we're looking for what we can do to equip you to recognize that your rights have been defended and you can go out there and use some of the particular precedents in a very effective way. And that's just one more justification, I think, Collin, for why people should support Point of View.
So many reasons to support Point of View, and that's one of them. Of course, one of the best hosts in America. That's another one, and a crack staff that's getting together all of the resources that you have access to on pointofview.net. I want to encourage you. We've got a $1,200 dollar-for-dollar match on the board right now, thanks to our friend Pat in Pennsylvania. Just got gifts in from William in South Carolina, Tom in Nebraska, and Xiao in Georgia, and that gets us down to $950 of the $1,200 dollar-for-dollar match. Want to encourage you to sign up at $30 a month, or maybe $50 a month. Maybe you could do $100 a month. Maybe like Pat, you could do $1,200. We might be able to use that for a matching challenge. We're probably going to need some larger gifts, $3,000, $5,000, $10,000, whatever you can do. Today's really about participation. I mentioned at the beginning of the program, we'd love to have 75 calls or clicks. We're at 15 already, so 60 more from states. We're in 40 states, Kerby. I mean, we're talking about Texas, New Hampshire, South Carolina, North Carolina, Ohio. We've heard from Alaska, California, Arkansas, Minnesota, wherever you are. If we could see maybe 2 or 3 calls from each of these states, we would be right where we want to be this afternoon. Gifts of every amount. Everyone is being doubled right now, up to $950 in a dollar-for-dollar match. 800-347-5151. 800-347-5151 or pointofview.net.
You ready to hear an enthusiastic voice? That would be,
am.
of course, the voice of Jana Weidler, Vice President of Stewardship. Jana, thank you for joining us again today.
Oh, my pleasure, Kerby and Collin. It's good to be with you guys.
One of the things we were going to start talking about, and I thought I'd get you and Collin to address that, why do we come to people twice a year? Because it does seem to me that some people say, well, you know, I listen to other programs and they have advertising, but in some respects we are listener supported and we are dependent upon our listeners to help us bring these programs to them every single day.
We truly are very dependent on our partners and the listeners. And I will tell you, most of you know that I live in Colorado Springs, and Focus of the Family is here. They have 1,000 to 2,000 employees. The Navigators are here. They have over 6,000 employees, 1,300 of which are in Colorado Springs. And Compassion International has like 7,800. We have 12. And I tell you what, we do a lot with these 12 employees. We do a lot with every dollar we get in. And our budget is about $1.3 million. And you look at the budgets for other ministries and they are sky high. But I will let you know our employees are cross-trained. They are able to do many tasks. We work closely as a team, and we are always praying for God's will in every step we take. And we've been on the air for, well, Kerby, you know, 54 years. We're one of the longest running radio talk shows. And one of the things that I think we're really expanding on is we continue to evolve and change so that we provide the biblical information for all generations. So as our older listeners are retiring and downsizing, we still need every person that listens to Point of View to reach out, call us, and donate. Become a monthly partner if you can. And we just appreciate every gift we get.
Jana, you've done such a great job of explaining what's going on here, and I just want to take the moment to encourage people as you've listened to Jana. We have a $1,200 dollar-for-dollar match on the board, and we have $820 remaining on this now, $820, but only 7 minutes left in this hour. I would love to care for that in this next 7 minutes. We have people who can answer the phones. You can go straight to pointofview.net. You don't even have to talk to anybody. Fill out the form, takes just a couple of minutes. Jolie gave a gift of $30. Thank you for that. Lucy in California with a gift of $100. Every single gift matters. Almost 20 people already engaged today, looking for 75 calls or clicks this afternoon, and you can be one of those. We need everybody involved today if we're going to meet our goal by tomorrow. It's just today and tomorrow, and that's it. So we encourage you to be a part right now. 800-347-5151, 800-347-5151, or pointofview.net.
Jen, I appreciate your enthusiasm. And again, one of the reasons we come twice a year is to remind people that we're listener supported. And then the rest of the time, we focus on the content. And that is certainly what we are dedicated to. When you talk about the 12 people, a good number, some of them are part-time. So again, a lot with a little. And so as you have seen other ministries, you've oftentimes said that we really are able to maximize the resources that people place in our hands.
We do, and these resources are incredible. We have the Outlook magazine that comes out monthly, and we have the Biblical View booklets that come out monthly. And these are only available to people that give on a monthly basis or give a certain amount as a gift that would have amounted to a monthly gift. And these are powerful tools. I tell you, we one of the things that we really focus on, besides putting on the daily radio show, is providing people with the information that they need in their hands so that they can witness to other people and provide biblical clarity for those who think differently.
Well, again, I appreciate you joining with us, and I see the clock, and we need to get back to Collin and remind everybody that we have a match still on the table.
$1,200 dollar-for-dollar match underway right now, down to $720 remaining, but we only have 5 minutes left in the hour. Let's fill up all these phone lines. Let's have the internet jammed with folks getting engaged. Wherever you're listening today, would you participate? If you're ministered to by the work of Kerby and the team here at Point of View, it's biblical to give back to those who have sown into your life. 800-347-5151, 800-347-5151, or pointofview.net.
You know, you mentioned that you were hoping we get 75 calls or clips, and if those were all phone calls, I think you already just heard we don't have enough people to answer the phones. So if people keep waiting to the very end, sometimes then they have to go into some kind of call waiting for a minute until we get to them. So one of the advantages as we go to the top of the hour is we won't be back on the program for a few minutes, and that is a perfect time to call. But we don't want to overwhelm our resources because we are rather limited in some of those. But we would love to hear from you right now. So as we go to a break, we come back, we're going to talk about socialism. We're going to talk about the midterms with Walker Wildmon. We're going to talk about a number of really important issues, but we need to hear from you right now. That number is 800-347-5151, 1-800-347-5151. Of course, at any time, you can go to the website, pointofview.net. We'll be right back.
Would you like to see our culture changed with biblical truth? Well, then we must first reach individual people, one person at a time. Here's why. Once someone understands a biblical worldview, it changes every area of their lives, reaching out to their family, their friends, and their community. You can make that kind of far-reaching difference right now by joining the Truth Team. The Truth Team powers Point of View to bring a biblical worldview directly to hundreds of thousands of Americans through live radio, on-demand podcasts, and many other digital and printed resources. Point of View needs you to join the Truth Team now because we're running out of time to reach our spring goal of $150,000. Will you equip individuals with biblical truth so they can change the culture? To join the Truth Team, visit pointofview.net or call 1-800-347-5151. That's pointofview.net and 1-800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this. Across America, live, this is Point of View. And now, Kerby Anderson.
Back once again in our fourth day of our Truth Team Week. In studio with me, Collin Lambert, and I thought many people wondered as we were going to a break how we're doing with that match that you've put on the table.
Yeah, well, it's Truth Team Week, and so every single gift is important. We had Pat who called in with a gift of $1,200 and said, use this to encourage others to give. So we had a dollar-for-dollar match on the board of that $1,200, and we blew right past that. You blew right past that. So thank you very much. Congratulations for doing that. And as we start this new hour, we're going to start with a brand new matching challenge from our friend Ron in California. It's a total of $1,500, dollar-for-dollar match. It starts right now at 800-347-5151, 800-347-5151, pointofview.net. Let me thank a couple of people because these came in a flurry right at the end of the hour. James, South Carolina, Leroy in Georgia, Vicky in Texas, Robert, Julie in Georgia, Lynette in South Carolina, Charlotte in California, Melissa in Ohio, Karen in South Carolina, Nita in North Carolina. Sounds like some of those states are doing a shout out today, and we need to hear from every state that we're in, including a couple or three people maybe in each area, and that would really help us get there. Our goal for the program today was at least 75 calls or clicks. We're at 30 right now.
Very good.
So we'd love to see this hour 45 people either call or click in and be a part. And again, a $1,500 dollar-for-dollar match on the board right now. 800-347-5151 or pointofview.net.
I thought we might put some of this in perspective, so we brought into the studio here the president of Point of View, Warren Kelly. And again, we are making our way, but we have a long way to go.
We do. We are halfway through the fourth of 5 days for our Truth Team Week, and we are less than a third of the way toward the goal. So we really do need to hear from you. Your gifts are very important, and they do make a difference. And I want to say that, Collin, I think, said this earlier in the week. This is not extra money to, do extra things or have fun with. This is what we count on to operate, to keep things going. I am very blessed to have a tremendous team, and everyone on the team does a great job. Every one of them is worth more than we pay them, but they all have this pesky thing about them that when Friday comes along, they expect to have a paycheck. And that's a whole lot easier to do if we hit the goal than if we don't hit the goal, because those things are important. And let me say, again, every one of you that have given, I appreciate that more than I can say. Yeah. And I want you to know that your gifts really do make a difference. Mm-hmm. This program changes the lives, the thinking, the worldview of people across the nation. And those people go on to do some amazing things. Some small, some large, but they do amazing things to affect our culture. And I don't know anybody who has affected the culture of our nation more than Point of View.
I was just thinking about that because last night I'm watching Sean Hannity and Allie Beth Stuckey comes on, and I remember when she was sitting right there where you are right now doing what at that time was called the Millennial Roundtable, and we first started using her when she was the conservative millennial, and of course I think most people know who she is right now, and of course we've had luncheons with people that they'd never heard of the speaker who Pete Hegseth. They probably know who he is now. You just start thinking about the things that we've done, the people we've known. Of course, I've known people like Eric Metaxas, Collin, even before he had written a best-selling book. And we've met, and as a matter of fact, the same thing with Joel Rosenberg. We've known a lot of these people for a long time, but we also recognize that as our donor base gets older, we're looking for some of the younger listeners out there, and that's why we have the Know Why podcast and the Next Generation Outreach and all sorts of other things that we're involved with. These roundtables that we do, these podcasts we do, are all an attempt to keep ministering, but also to prepare the next generation.
Well, and you're doing that, and that's one of the important things. A lot of people talk about it. You're actually doing it, and one of the things I loved hearing from Joshua Burns yesterday is just the impact that it's beginning to have, and Liberty's talked about it as well. You have young people who are listening to different parts of your product that you put out every single day that are grabbing the materials and the resources, and they will be the next Kerby Andersons. They will be the next people to talk about Christian worldview, to talk about what the Bible says and what's happening in culture. So literally your gift right now, not only is it 100% guarantee that it's going to affect people's lives for a very positive event, but also it is reaching into the next generation. It is a legacy type giving. You're only able to listen today because somebody gave before you. So as you give today, you can know that you're making it possible for someone to engage with their kids and their grandkids in the future. Again, right now, a $1,500 dollar-for-dollar match on the board, 800-347-5151 or pointofview.net.
Warren, tell me if I've missed a list here, because I was looking at people that have run for office, people that have gone to their school library to check out the books and complain. We know of people that have started pregnancy resource centers, people that have started Christian schools, people who've decided to homeschool their kids, people that have been willing to stand up for religious liberty. Those are just a few of many of the things you can come up with.
So many. I know people that have gotten involved in their state legislatures, people that never had any interest in politics before, but once they understood what was happening because of Point of View, they got involved and made a difference. So it's at every level. I know people who have run for school board. I know people who have run for city council, people who have run for state legislature, people who have lobbied their state legislature, people in Congress. Even we have two listeners who ran for president.
Yes.
So it's amazing the impact that the program has had on so many levels in so many ways.
And again, one of the other ones I thought of is we have our action item. And I've run into a number of donors over the years and said, look, I'll be honest, I have never written a letter to a member of Congress, but you made it so easy. All I had to do is click a few things, and I was actually exercising my civic duty. So again, Collin, that's just one of the many benefits of being a donor to Point of View, not just the radio program, the videos, the podcasts, all sorts of other things that we make available, and that's what you're supporting when you send in your gift.
We'd love to see at least 44 more people participate this hour. Again, if you're listening in Texas or South Carolina or Georgia or North Carolina, Ohio, Alaska, Mississippi, wherever you're listening right now, if we could have one or two people call with a gift from each of these locations, we're going to hit that 44, and that's going to help us move that much further down the line. And right now, there's incentive because we have the $1,500 dollar-for-dollar match on the board, 800-347-5151, 800-347-5151. Looks like we're down to $1,380 remaining of that $1,500, so you can call or click right now, 800-347-5151 or pointofview.net.
When we come back, we're going to be talking with our friend Walker Wildmon of American Family Association. Earlier, you heard the clip from Gary Bauer, how we've partnered with him. Just a minute, you're going to hear one from Tony Perkins and how we've worked with him in the past, but certainly we've appreciated our friends at American Family Association. We're going to talk about equipping people for the midterms, dealing with some of these legislative battles, some of these judicial battles. Even one of the things they've been working on is something we talked about with Lathan Watts, trying to have an impact in the business world as well. So we're going to continue talking with him, but that means you need to also still be calling or visiting the website. The phone call is easy, 800-347-5151. And of course, the website is pointofview.net. We'll be right back.
This is Viewpoints with Kerby Anderson.
How are Gen Z employees doing in the workplace? 2 articles point to significant problems. Susie Welch is a professor of NYU's Stern School of Business. In her article in the Wall Street Journal, she explains her values inventory that can help anyone, especially young adults, discover their purpose through the intersection of their values, aptitude, and economically viable interest. Her analysis produced a number that startled her coworkers and her. A mere 2% of Gen Z members hold the values that companies want most in new hires, namely achievement, learning, and an unbridled desire to work. She and her researchers surveyed 2,100 experienced hiring managers to identify the most important values they desired in their new employees. When they compared those values to the 45,000 Gen Z respondents, they found only 2% matched. These observations are being validated in real world in real time. Oriana Rose Royal, writing in Fortune, documents that bosses are firing Gen Z grads just months after hiring them. One report found that 6 in 10 employers have already sacked some Gen Z workers they hired out of college. The employers said that these young people lacked motivation or initiative. Other bosses pointed to Gen Z being unprofessional, unorganized, and having poor communication skills as their top reasons for firing these recent college graduates. There are some solutions. Companies can begin targeting their hiring efforts to find that 2%. Colleges can start alerting students to this issue, and students can start changing their attitudes so they can be a positive force in a company. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
Go deeper on topics like you just heard by visiting pointofview.net. That's pointofview.net. Restoring America's Godly Heritage. Point of View.
Well, as you know, there are a lot of places you can get information, but there's only a few places that you can get the right information. And I think Point of View brings to the Christian community the insight necessary to understand the issues of our day. And I'd hate to think what our country would look like if we did not have programs like Point of View and what Point of View has been doing for 3 decades. So I, for one, am grateful that we have Point of View out there.
Point of View, restoring America's godly heritage.
Tony Perkins, Family Research Council, and again, a good friend, and thought you'd like to hear from him. And again, encouraging you to support this ministry. So again, we will get to some of the other issues in just a minute, but I thought we'd find out from Collin exactly how we're doing.
Yeah, we've got this $1,500 dollar-for-dollar match on the board so far. We've got $180 in, so $1,320 to go. We've got about 41 minutes now remaining in the hour. Would love to see 42 more calls or clicks, so I'm pretty sure we can fit that in. It's just about everybody doing something. Remember, as you give, you're not giving to us per se. You're giving to the ministry, to the work that's going on, impacting people's lives every day. It's an act of thanksgiving. It brings glory to our Father in heaven. It creates gratitude. It's in Philippians 4:17 and 18. It's called a fragrant offering or a sacrifice acceptable to God. So many reasons to give and give joyfully, and let's make this a joyful Thursday, shall we? $1,500 dollar-for-dollar match. Kurt and Elma just gave $50. Michael in Arizona, $10 a month. Henry in Florida, $60. What can you do today? 800-347-5151, pointofview.net.
Let me just for a minute mention that one of the articles I've posted here is by John Stossel, the economist who got it right. And the advantage of this is it's a good 4-page summary of a video, and I watched the video before it came on the air just so I had it all in my head, and it's 20 minutes. So again, it's a time opportunity to learn about these 2 economists who he said got it right. And you might say, okay, who are those? Ludwig von Mises, and you're going, I don't know who that is, and Friedrich Hayek. Well, first of all, again, some of us that read these things, here is the book by Friedrich Hayek, and you might say, okay, I'm never going to read that book. There's not a snowflake chance I'll ever even crack the book. And the good news is I have produced a little booklet on the road to serfdom. Because quite frankly, Collin, some people, when I say Friedrich Hayek, they probably think he's the father of Selma Hayek or something like that. And so here is a booklet we've done on socialism. Why? Have you noticed we have a number of people in government right now that are socialists?
Yeah.
We're talking about the mayor of New York City. We're talking about the mayor of Seattle. We're talking about various members in the House and Senate. You probably have some young people that have come home from college, and they think socialism is better than capitalism. And so I thought, well, we already have a socialism book. So I thought, well, here's this book on the road to serfdom. Now, you might remember when you were growing up, we had these Cliff Notes. Spurs. Remember the Cliff Notes? Sometimes that's how some of us got through. Well, this is an attempt to, in a fairly short number of pages, with some good references back to the book, help you know in about 10 minutes. It only takes you about 10 minutes to read this, to learn a little bit more. But the point that John Stossel is making is that we have seen all sorts of economic disasters. We are convinced that we are going to have to work harder than ever because of the younger generation that is actually convinced that socialism is not only better than capitalism, but even the Bible teaches socialism. And so we even have a section here, does the Bible really teach socialism? No, it doesn't. But nevertheless, that is the case. And here are these pieces, a quote from Friedrich Hayek saying, "The curious task of economics is to demonstrate to men how little they really know what they imagine they can design." And the argument is that this idea of central planning, they're going to get together a bunch of bureaucrats and they're going to plan the economy. Has that ever worked out? Well, again, if you go back to our little socialism booklet, we point out that the count is up to at least 24 different countries that have tried socialism. And I'll give you the final conclusion. They all failed. Yeah. They all failed. And so these are the kinds of things you might say, well, I want to read it first. I want to get 2 more copies. Maybe I can call Jana Weidler and she can give me some. And I want to hand it to my grandkids and say, read this. Or maybe they would say, well, yes, but I think these people that are really intelligent in Washington, D.C. can actually make good decisions. Well, then the road to serfdom, unfortunately, is paved with good intentions. So you might say, you're talking about some of these issues that I never hear anybody talking about in other talk shows. Well, that's why I wanted you to see this very good piece today by John Stossel. Even if you don't want to read the 4 pages of his commentary, you can sit down and watch the 20-minute video and maybe pass that on to some people that really need to know that socialism is not better than capitalism. It is a way in which you lose your freedom, you lose your private property rights, and it's not good for the future of the country.
Yeah. It's just one of those examples, Kerby, of the kind of material you bring every day that folks can find online. They can get answers to questions about just about every topic. You'll find guests on the air with Kerby who you don't see or hear anywhere else. You'll find people who are making an impact behind the scenes that you never really hear about. And you'll hear the Christian foundation for the kinds of conversations that people are having all over the country. What does the Bible say about it? Well, you'll find out on Point of View. It makes a difference. Looking for 42 more people to call or click through in the next, looks like 36 minutes remaining. 36 minutes remaining. We have a $1,500 dollar-for-dollar match on the board. So far, $540 in, $960 available. So right now, any gift up to $960 will be doubled dollar for dollar at this point. Pointofview.net. Go online. Just takes a couple of minutes. Safe and secure. Pointofview.net. Click the Give Now button or go to 800-347-5151. 800-347-5151. 5151.
Might just mention as we're going to a break here that one of the other benefits, I think, of you visiting the website, and I would encourage you to go there to get these resources and obviously to make a donation, is the Viewpoints commentary, which we've been making available for many years now. And the most recent one is about Gen Z employees. And I actually take 2 different articles that were available and pulled them together. One is from the Wall Wall Street Journal, Susie Welch. I think she's actually related, married to Jack Welch, but anyways, a professor at the NYU Stern School of Business. And she writes in the Wall Street Journal about the fact that when we look at what is going on right now with the Gen Z, she found something very interesting. She went out and, first of all, interviewed 2,100 different hiring managers, people that will hire individuals, and asked them what were the values that were most important when they were to bring in employees. Then she went back to the 45,000 Gen Z respondents and did a matchup and found something very, very disturbing. A mere 2% of Gen Z members hold values that companies want most in their new hires, namely achievement, learning, and unbridled desire to work. And then I went on to a very good article. It was in Fortune magazine. These are the kind of things I read so you don't have to read. And this individual was actually pointing out that as we looked at the various bosses of this year where they surveyed them, 6 in 10 employers said they'd already sacked one of their Gen Z workers for lacking motivation, initiative, they were unprofessional, being unorganized, poor communication skills. The point I'm making is that's just one of those resources we're putting out there, because if nothing else, if you're Gen Z, you might go back and say, maybe I need to change some of the things I'm doing. Maybe if you are in a company, you need to explain to people what you're really looking for and work hard to find those 2%. Maybe colleges should start alerting students to this important issue, and I guarantee you probably heard it first here on Point of View. So something as simple as, will your children and grandchildren, probably many of you now have maybe Gen Z grandchildren, are they going to get a job, and are they going to keep their job? And that's just one of the many things that we talk about here on Point of View, and I hope, again, a good reason to support Point of View. 33 minutes to go in the hour. 33 minutes. We have a $1,500 dollar-for-dollar match on the board right now. 640 of that is gone, so we can match up to $860 from our good friend Ron in California, who made these gifts available. $860, dollar-for-dollar match. Your gift is doubled. Your impact is doubled right now. It can be a one-time gift. It can be a monthly gift. You can increase your monthly gift. If you're giving monthly, you could give a one-time gift just during this week. And, of course, we're looking for folks who've never given to Point of View before. Maybe you've been listening years. No guilting you, just saying. How about starting right now as the first time you've ever given to Point of View? The need is clear. We have very short amount of time remaining. 800-347-5151. A lot more content to cover, but most importantly, we are encouraging you as we go to a break. Perfect time to make that phone call. 800-347-5151. Of course, the website, pointofview.net. We'll be right back.
America's founding fathers knew that freedom requires morality. It was John Adams who said, "Our Constitution was made only for a moral and religious people. It is wholly inadequate to the government of any other." If we want to preserve the freedom in America, we must equip Americans with a biblical worldview once more. For over 50 years, Point of View has done just that by applying a biblical perspective to every issue of the day, thanks to our ministry partners, people like you. And that is why I'm asking you to join the Truth Team. And the time to join is right now, because Point of View needs to raise $150,000 this week. Help America reclaim its moral compass. Join the Truth Team today by visiting pointofview.net or call 1-800-347-5151. That's pointofview.net and 1-800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this. You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is Kerby Anderson.
Back once again, we are encouraging your phone call, 800-347-5151. Collin Lambert with us as we kind of wind down the last half hour of the fourth day of our Truth Team Week.
Yeah, we've got about 26 remaining in the hour, 26 minutes remaining. We've got a $1,500 dollar-for-dollar match on the board, $1,020 in, so just $480 remaining. $480 can be matched dollar for dollar right now. And as you call 800-347-5151, 800-347-5151, or pointofview.net, your gift right now being doubled, your impact being doubled from a special gift from Ron in California for $1,500. Want to do a couple of thank yous. Becky in Georgia, thank you for your gift. Cecilia in Maine, I think that's the first of Maine. Is it Mainite? What do you call a Manian? I'm not sure. Maybe Cecilia can fill us in. Ron with a gift. Leroy in Georgia, $30 a month. And I wanted to specifically highlight Colleen because she did something that I talked about earlier. Colleen in Arizona has increased her giving from $10 a month to $30 a month. So, Colleen, thank you for doing that. And that is another way that you can help us out during Truth Team Week, is increasing that monthly gift or giving a one-time gift on top of your monthly gift. Both of those would be great. 800-347-5151, 800-347-5151, pointofview.net.
You know, some people oftentimes want to know what's going to be taking place tomorrow, and that is, of course, we'll have Kelly Shackelford with us, and I think he's going to be very excited because, of course, last week we did announce that the First Liberty Institute have had 11 cases go to the Supreme Court. They won all 11. Most recent one they won. Last two, actually, have won unanimously. So that's a victory. We're also going to be talking about the fact that the Olympic Committee is now banning male athletes from female sports, which is something I saw coming because the head of the athletic committee for the Olympics is from Zimbabwe and was a swimmer and was concerned about that as well. So we're going to talk about some of the victories. We're also going to talk about some of the challenges. Kelly's going to talk about an employee that was fired from a coffee shop of all places because of religious beliefs, and also the threat that they are dealing with right now of violent agitators showing up in synagogues or churches. Matter of fact, we also have a piece by Ben Shapiro, Are We Safe Anymore? So there are going to be some really important issues that we will be discussing tomorrow. And that is, again, one of the reasons why I know you listen to Point of View. I think one of the things I found, Collin, is of all our programs, mostly people, when we ask them what is their favorite program, well, sometimes they'll mention, well, I'm really interested in the pro-life issue or whatever. But if they mention a particular day, they say, oh, I love the Friday program because it's the round table. And, of course, you're going to be sitting with some of these individuals as well. And as I've pointed out before, Kelly Shackelford is not looking for something to do, but he is quite willing to come in and tomorrow join with us for 2 hours because he is a donor to Point of View. And he's making a big sacrifice because they have a big event Saturday night, and yet he's still coming in here tomorrow to really encourage you to support Point of View. So let me encourage you as well, and he will do that tomorrow. 800-347-5151.
All right. Well, we want to celebrate because we just hit the $1,500 dollar-for-dollar match, and someone just put us over. It may have been Kathy in Missouri with a gift of $400. Thank you, Kathy. Want to go back and thank Ron in California who gave that original gift of $1,500. We are so grateful for that. Also, the most recent gifts that have just come in, John from South Carolina, $10 a month. Jack in Texas with $50. Thank you for that. We're down to 22 minutes remaining in the hour. And, boy, now is the time to call. 800-347-5151, 800-347-5151, or pointofview.net.
One of the things I thought I might just mention for a minute is that our good friends at Breakpoint Commentary, you know John Stone Street.
Sure.
He had a piece the other day, Yes, Jesus Had a God Complex. Now, you might say, what in the world is that all about? Well, John Stone Street and Timothy Paget wrote about that because there was a survey that was done in the UK, that's in Great Britain, and they interviewed young people ages 14 to 17, and that's kind of one of the groups we really want to reach with the gospel, and they wanted to understand how non-Christian kids thought about Scripture. Well, obviously, they didn't think very highly of God or of Jesus or of the Bible. Some felt that the God of the Bible was really violent and aggressive. They said God had an unequal power dynamic, and some of them even thought God the Father was a bully. Well, God the Son didn't come off any better. He was referred to as arrogant, powerful, religiously motivated male, but perhaps the most telling claim was they thought Jesus had a God complex. And Patrick West, who wrote the piece that was, I guess it was an American Spectator, and that's a very good piece, by the way, I would recommend. He wrote about why Gen Z is troubled by Jesus. Today I mentioned my commentaries about Gen Z employees, but this one is, again, where he said, look, they are oftentimes, unfortunately, raised in a world where authority figures command respect. They're naturally going to regard, or I should say without authority figures that command respect, but that is going to cause them to regard any of the teachings in a foreign sort of way. And in some respects, they find his lines, the idea of Christianity, simply incomprehensible. Well, anyway, around the round table the other day, Collin, we had a number of our guests. As a matter of fact, it's going to be very similar to the one we're going to have tomorrow. And they all agreed that maybe the students were sort of ill-informed, but you got to agree with their conclusion. Jesus did have a God complex. And they ended the Breakpoint commentary with this famous C.S. Lewis quote that I use many times, where C.S. Lewis said, look, you can shut him up for a fool, you can spit at him and kill him as a demon, or you can fall at his feet and call him Lord and God, but let us not come up with any patronizing nonsense about him being a great human teacher. He has not left that open to us. He did not intend to. I know a lot of our listeners have heard the idea of Lord, liar, lunatic, but again, somebody who makes the kind of claims that Jesus made, you just can't come away by trying to downplay his claims. And quite frankly, they were even pointing out that in a lot of these churches there in England, they have done that very thing. And so if we're going to reach this next generation, obviously it's going to be a challenge, but we are dedicated to that. You're noticing that we are trying to bring many of these young voices onto Point of View because I think in the past, you and I would go to the National Religious Broadcasters conventions and we say, who's passing it on to us? Yeah. And that sometimes was done, but most of the time it never was. But we're working really hard to pass it on to this next generation. And I think it's just one more reason to support Point of View.
That is one of the keys to Point of View, is this effort to continue to reach the next generation. And we're so grateful for what you do, Kerby, and the younger folks involved with you, Liberty and others, who are continuing to push down to the next generation's information that they're really, again, they're getting all their information off of TikTok. It's scary. It's really scary to think about what they're going to be thinking in the next 5, 10, 15 years when it's all being taught to them through TikTok, and much of it just totally inaccurate. 800-347-5151, 800-347-5151. We have 18 minutes remaining. We're looking for about 33 more calls or clicks. So whether you're listening in Texas or New Hampshire or Illinois or California or Georgia or Alaska, wherever you're listening, let's see if we can get 33 more folks to participate here in the next 18 minutes. Gifts of any amount, 800-347-5151 or pointofview.net.
When we come back, we'll get into a little bit more. One of those is the other day we had Jay Budashevsky on, and you live in Austin, so you probably heard that name there, University of Texas at Austin. And he's written this book called The Pandemic of Lunacy, How to Think Clearly When Everyone Around You Seems Crazy. And so we will get into a little of that and did have a very good interview with him. I suspect it will probably end up in short order on one of our, if you will, highlight reels that we put on Spotify, which is something that is done by Megan Kitchen. And so that is certainly the case. So we will certainly get back to that in just a minute. But just before we talk about some of the insanity that we are surrounded by, and also the need for us to try to get trustworthy news, information, and commentary, we hope that we are your trusted source, news and commentary that you can trust, and certainly that is the case. So as we go to our break, we would hope that we get the rest of those individuals that you were hoping would either call or click through. And so that is a very good time to do so. As we go to the website, again, pointofview.net, you can find out more about some of the benefits of actually joining at the Truth Team level. Click on that button that says Give Now. Scroll down. You can see the various thank you gifts and resources that are available to you. And I hope that you would certainly take advantage of those. But more importantly, I would also hope that as we go to a break, many of you have been waiting to make that phone call. Now's the time to make it. 1-800-347-5151. 1-800-347-5151. We come back. Collin will give us an update, and we'll look forward to the last few minutes and then tomorrow. And that's it. I'll be right back.
Restoring America's godly heritage. Point of View.
It's not an either-or thing. Jesus didn't say you're to be the salt of the earth or the light of the world. You're to be salt and light. And, that's what I appreciate and why I support Point of View, because what you all are doing is you are being salt in this world. You're calling for God's people to stand up against unrighteousness by being equipped with the truth. And I think that is why it is so important that we support this ministry.
Point of View. Restoring America's godly heritage.
Pastor Robert Jeffress, again, just encouraging you to support this ministry. Each day we try to give you a sampling of some of the people that we've known for quite some time. We've known Robert Jeffress for a long time and a good friend, and actually now, because of course he's been the pastor for many, many years now at First Baptist just down the road, he's oftentimes will be able to come in studio with us, and he's just one of many pastors that we always love to hear from. Of course, we've had Jack Graham and Jack Hibbs and Greg Laurie. And I mean, I'll give you a very long list, but we only have a few minutes left. So, Collin, I won't go through that long list of individuals we've interviewed, but if nothing else, you have a list of individuals that have given.
Yeah, and you know what? We've got a mad dash we're going to do here. 11 minutes remaining in the hour. We've got a gift from Judy of $1,000 in a dollar-for-dollar match. Let's see in this next 11 minutes if we can get this $1,000 cared for. We haven't heard from folks in Connecticut, Kentucky, Louisiana, Massachusetts, Mississippi, New Jersey, Rhode Island, Utah. So if you're in any of those states, give us a shout out and give your gift, and it's going to be doubled right now thanks to Judy with that $1,000 dollar-for-dollar match. Let's see how many folks we can get in here in the last few minutes. We're looking for 29 more calls or clicks in the next 11 minutes. Here's the number, 800-347-5151, 800-347-5151, pointofview.net. Every gift right now being doubled.
I thought just for a minute I would mention that we did do an interview a while back with Jay Budashevsky, who's been a professor, University of Texas at Austin, and I think he became a professor and then became a Christian because he is a very prominent individual who is a very strong Christian. Of course, we've talked to him about various books over the years, but we had him on the other day talking about his book, Pandemic of Lunacy, How to Think Clearly When Everyone Around You Seems Crazy. I did do a little commentary on it. I'm thinking we might even do another one of those cliff notes on his book, but he really breaks it down into about 30 different lunacies and then breaks them into sections called delusions. One of those delusions are about virtue and happiness, and that's the idea, the postmodern idea that, well, you have your view of right and wrong, I have my view of right and wrong. That doesn't work. Part two was delusions about politics, because he's written about that, and one of those delusions is the lunacy that we can attain common good without virtue. Well, if you saw my commentary that came out today, you can see that John Adams and many others rejected that idea because it was false. We have, of course, the delusions about family and sexuality, which we'll get into probably a little bit tomorrow when we have Kelly Shackelford and Liberty McCarter, because that's the lunacy that says We have 95 genders, and a man can get pregnant, none of which are good ideas and even possible. Part 4, delusions about what it means to be human. And that gets into topics we deal with, very famous ones about abortion and evolution, but even things like transhumanism that we talked about with Liberty on Monday. Then delusions about what's real and unreal, the belief that people have their own reality and that whatever we say is right and whatever we say is true, which is not the case. And then finally, ones that sort of relate to what we talked about a minute ago, delusions about God and religion, that we can't know the truth about God, or the truth is there is no God. And Collin, that one's just difficult to handle, because even by next week, we're going to be doing one of 2 very significant interviews on archaeology, validating the Bible, and of course, all the historical and other kinds of evidence coming our direction. So if you appreciate the kind of work that we do to give you news, commentary, and information, but also to deal with these areas which we call apologetics. How do you defend the Christian faith? That's another service and resource that we make available here on Point of View.
All right, we've got 7 minutes remaining and 28 more calls or clicks we'd like to see. 7 minutes remaining, and we've got $1,000 dollar-for-dollar match on the board right now. Your gift right now will be doubled. Let me do a few thank yous. Zolma in Michigan, thank you for your gift. Diane in North Carolina, Tim in Georgia, Anita in South Carolina, Lorna with a monthly gift in Illinois, Janice in California, Sue from North Pole, Alaska. Thank you for your gift. Michael, appreciate your gift as well. And Suzanne from Georgia, grateful for you. A $1,000 dollar-for-dollar match on the board. Every gift doubled right now. We're down to 7 minutes remaining. Would love to see 20. We're down to, 50 would be 25 more calls or clicks in the next couple of minutes. Pointofview.net. You can go there. Absolutely no waiting. Or call 800-347-5151.
You know, again, one of the things we talk about are some of the resources we make available, like the booklets. But even if you can't give to Point of View, you can certainly sign up to get the Viewpoints commentary. And I was just thinking, the one yesterday talked about the conspiracy theories about Israel. You might say, well, I really need something to maybe give me an answer to some things I'm hearing from my friends or neighbors about that. Or, of course, the one I just mentioned a minute ago, I got a commentary coming out, and, of course, an interview we did on the pandemic of lunacy. How do I answer some of these crazy ideas that people have around me? Those are resources we make available free of charge. Of course, all sorts of videos are available free, but I think all of you probably figured out there's no such thing as a free lunch. So some of you, if you can help us out financially, it allows us to make all of this available free to other individuals who can't necessarily support this ministry.
We love those who are making these gifts available to encourage others to give by creating these dollar-for-dollar matching challenges. We appreciate everybody who responds to those. But let me speak to maybe that person here in the last few minutes who could give a larger gift, whether it's a stock gift or it's one of these qualified distributions or just a one-time gift. We're going to need some gifts of $5,000 or $10,000 or $20,000. Very few people can do that. I certainly can't, but somebody can. And you may be listening right now and you've been praying about what to do with that next gift that you want to give. Let me tell you, Point of View is worth your time and effort, and your gift is going to change lives for eternity. 800-347-5151, 800-347-5151, or pointofview.net.
As I always say, just as we come to the end of the program, we will still take your phone calls. We have that $1,000 match on the table, and nevertheless, Collin thought we could get it done in one segment. So we'll see if we get it done. And if
we'll
it takes
keep pushing. We got 5 minutes left.
Yeah, so we got a few more segments left. We would certainly be able to it, but we will still take calls off the air. So let's, if we can, see what you can do to help us out. Most importantly, I do want you to take the time, even if you go off the air and you think, well, we've been praying about it and I'd like to give. You don't have to wait till tomorrow to call in. You can go to the website, pointofview.net, click on that button that says Give Now, and there is a place where you can have a single gift, or I hope some of you will consider an ongoing monthly gift, because, again, our bills come in monthly. If our income comes in monthly, that matches up pretty well.
That's a great way to do it. Again, my wife wife and I have almost always given in the 12-month plan because we don't usually have all the money up front, and we're usually able to give a little larger gift by breaking it up over 12 months. $1,000 dollar-for-dollar match. We're going to keep that on the board till it's used up. You can call or click right now, 800-347-5151 or pointofview.net.
If you enjoyed all the clips that we've heard today, well, those come from Megan, and certainly she has been helpful in engineering the program and pulling together all the audio behind the scenes. Of course, another person behind the scenes is Steve, and we thank him for producing the program. But Collin, we've only got seconds left, but we will continue taking those phone calls at 800-347-5151. Of course, you can go to the website, pointofview.net. Thank you for being with us today. See you back here tomorrow, right here on Point of View.
Would you like to see our culture changed with biblical truth? Well, then we must first reach individual people, one person at a time. Here's why. Once someone understands a biblical worldview, it changes every area of their lives, reaching out to their family, their friends, and their community. You can make that kind of far-reaching difference right now by joining the Truth Team. The Truth Team powers Point of View to bring a biblical worldview directly to hundreds of thousands of Americans through live radio, on-demand podcasts, and many other digital and printed resources. Point of View needs you to join the Truth Team now because we're running out of time to reach our spring goal of $150,000. Will you equip individuals with biblical truth so they can change the culture? To join the Truth Team, visit pointofview.net or call 1-800-347-5151. That's pointofview.net and 1-800-347-5151. Point of View is produced by Point of View Ministries.